bill. The full title, the Consumer First Energy Act of 2008. What are some of the highlights of this bill? What do you see as its strong points and its weak points?
Well, I can tell you that in Vermont, that I know all over this country, people are up against the wall now with these outrageously high oil prices. In New England, we worry very much about what happens next winter when home heating oil prices are also going to be soaring. And if we don't get a handle on this, I can tell you that there will be people who will be going cold, people who will be taking money away from their food budgets in order to heat their homes. So this is an issue that has got to be dealt with. In the midst of soaring energy prices, there are a couple of things that are going on that Congress has got to address, and this bill begins to take a look at. I find it rather absurd and obscene, to tell you the truth, that oil profits are now at the highest level they have ever been. ExxonMobil in the last 2 years has earned more profits than any corporation in the history of the world. We have a gentleman who's head of Occidental Oil who last year pulled in $400 million. And meanwhile, in my state and in rural America, workers don't have enough money to fill up their gas tank in order to get to work. So I think we have to take a hard look at the greed of the oil companies, the degree to which they are ripping off the American people, and tell them enough is enough. My own view and what this bill deals with is a windfall profits tax, saying to them enough is enough. That's one issue. The second issue, which is getting increased attention, is that more and more energy economists believe that a significant part of the increase in oil prices is not due simply to supply and demand or the cost of production. What it is due to is speculation in oil futures. So you have companies like Goldman Sachs who have been enormously profitable, companies like Morgan Stanley who are bidding up prices which some people think may amount to 25 to 50% of what a barrel of oil is. So this bill begins to address that issue. It demands that the margin rates go up significantly higher. It demands that the Commodities Futures Commission begin to take a hard look at excess speculation and manipulation of the markets. What we know, Rob, is that over the last 7 or 8 years, we know that Enron, of course, got a handle on the electric market in the West Coast, driving up prices there beyond belief. And we know the fraud that was involved in that. We know that companies got a control of the propane gas market. We know that natural gas was also controlled in an artificial way. My own guess is that that's probably going on with oil and natural and home heating oil as well. So that's another provision that is in this bill. Furthermore, this bill addresses the OPEC cartel. You know, we have friends here in Washington, some of my conservative friends who believe in competition and free enterprise, and yet I think everybody understands that the function of OPEC is to exist as an oil cartel to limit production and to artificially raise prices. So this bill addresses that as well. But the bottom line is we have a major crisis which is not only impacting tens of millions of individual Americans, it's impacting our whole economy, driving food prices up, other prices as well.
Talking about the Senate debate on the energy bill today, the numbers are on the screen. Callers coming in already. First one from Valdez, North Carolina, on our line for Republicans. You're on with Senator Bernie Sanders.
Yes, I wanted to ask him about, first, they had a hearing June the 4th. The Senate Commerce Committee, and Chuck Grassley is the ranking member. Okay, and they had Mike Greenberger and George Soros and all on there. Okay, that was really enlightening, and I loved every minute of it. But he says, Mike Greenberg says that it's hedge funds, but which I have got an article out of Washington Post, and they're stating investors' growing appetite for oil invades market limits. Hedge funds and big Wall Street banks are taking advantage of loopholes. Michael Greenberg said if that loophole was closed, that the price of oil would go down tomorrow, 25 to 50%. And there's an article I'll see here about that. Okay, it says the commodity markets were never intended for such large financial players, and they're playing our market, and they're the crooks, and that loophole needs to be stopped.
Now, I agree with the caller, absolutely. In fact, we talked to Dr. Greenberg last week. George Soros, as you indicate, was also involved in that hearing. And again, there are a lot of energy economists who are telling us that after oil is produced, it is traded and traded and traded and traded on Wall Street These guys are making out like bandits, and people are now paying over $4 for a gallon of gas. So you're absolutely right. That loophole has got to be dealt with. Furthermore, a lot of this trading is taking place below the radar screen because of the so-called Enron loophole, which exempts from regulation energy trading. And we've got to re-regulate that. We need some transparency there so that Wall Street does not rip off the average American to the degree that's going on right now.
Will the bill that you're debating today address this
Yes, it does.
trading?
Yep, it does.
Okay. Next up, Stanton, Michigan, on our line for Democrats. You're on the Washington Journal.
Good morning. I just called a Republican yesterday who was running the debate on something about this, and he's one of the ones that talks about, solar's great, but when the sun goes down, and implying that all your electricity will stop, like we don't have batteries, and, stuff like that to scare people. And I called because I just got so frustrated. Every time a Republican stands up, and I don't care what you're talking about as far as bills go, it can be about a river. And the Republicans will get up, and the first thing they say is, this is the biggest tax hike in the history of the universe.
Okay.
And the second thing they say is, ever since the Democrats came in, oil has gone up, all this way, like it's all your fault, and you haven't. And then they say you haven't done anything.
Thanks for your comment.
Well, let me deal with that. I am an independent who caucuses with the Democrats. I think politically what we have right now in the Republican Party is a party which over the years has moved very, very far to the right. I think in President Bush now you have a right-wing extremist president who will go down in history as certainly one of the worst presidents that we have ever had. And what he has done in every area, not just the economy, not just Iraq, not just healthcare, not just global warming, in every area that you can think of, he has taken this country in the wrong direction. And when Republicans talk about tax hikes, let's talk about what's going on in the economy. And what's going on in the economy today is very clear, is the middle class in this country is collapsing. I asked the people in Vermont how the economy is doing for them lately, and they wrote me. Hundreds and hundreds of people described what's going on in their own lives, in which they are now used to be part of the middle class. They're now struggling economically just to keep their families together. This is going on all over the United States of America. So the reality of the American economy today, since Bush has been in office, 5 million Americans have slipped out of the middle class into poverty. Median family income today has gone down by $2,500 for working families since Bush has been president. 8 million Americans have lost their health insurance. 3 million have lost their pensions. The gap between the very, very rich and everybody else is getting wider. So what you're seeing is a sinking middle class. The people on top have never had it so good, and we're living in an economy of greed, and it's an issue that must be dealt with.
Next up, Wilson, North Carolina, on our line for Independence.
Yes, good morning, C-SPAN. I wanted to know why we're selling our oil, American oil that's here in America on the market. When we're selling it in futures, that means that they're going in the ground. They're selling it before it come out of the ground 20 years from now. So that means that these prices will never come down. And I don't understand. This is America's most valuable treasure. And not only that, but we're selling it on the world market. We're not even selling it to the American people. It's all about money. And I want to understand something. Why can't we, as a people, as American people, when imported is oil, which affect every aspect of the economy, can't we do the same thing that the oil companies is doing? Can't we build our own refineries? Can't we build our own oil wells and drill the oil out and sell it to the American people at the cost that it come out of the ground?
Well, that suggestion would be very, very radical for the United States Congress, and not something that the President of the United States would give 2 seconds of thought about. Let's be very clear, and I think more and more Americans understand it. While the middle class in this country is collapsing, the wealthiest people have never had it so good. And right here, we're a few blocks away from the Capitol. On any given day, you have hundreds and hundreds of lobbyists representing the largest and most powerful corporations in this country. If you look at the oil companies, if you look at the coal companies, they have spent hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars on lobbyists, on advertising, on campaign contributions. Same thing with the drug companies, same things with the insurance companies. And clearly what we need to do in this country is we need a political revolution which says that ordinary people have got to stand up and fight back, and that we start listening to the needs of working people in the middle class rather than billionaires and their lobbyists who have so much influence, certainly own the White House, but have a lot of influence on Congress.
In the Washington Post this morning's headline, at $4 a gallon, rethinking cars reign. They also talk about crude oil trading yesterday at more than $134 a barrel yesterday. What's in this bill that will bring down the cost of the cost of a gallon of gas and a cost of a barrel of oil?
Well, there are a couple of things. For a start, dealing with the issue of speculation is significant. As one of the callers indicated, there was a hearing just last week on the Commerce Committee where you had some economists who know a great deal about this issue who are estimating that between 25 and 50% of a barrel of oil right now is not due to supply and demand. That's an issue. It's not due to the cost of production. That's an issue. It is due to speculation. These guys aren't producing anything. They're selling it into the future and making quick profits. And if we address that, you can knock down the price of oil significantly, knock down the price of gas. And second of all, when we talk about a windfall profits tax on oil companies that give their CEOs $400 million a year in compensation, essentially what you're saying to these guys is, we're catching on to your ripping off the American people. Enough is enough. And I think they will get that message if the Congress has the courage to do the right thing, and if we can deal with a president who would be prepared to veto any serious legislation that hurts his friends in the oil industry.
In addition to the 25% windfall profits tax on major oil companies, the energy bill also gives the president authority to declare energy emergencies. Price gouging becomes a federal crime if there is any energy emergency. Suspends filling the Strategic Petroleum Oil Reserve during 2008 unless the oil price drops to $75 a barrel, and gives the Attorney General the ability to prosecute OPEC for oil price manipulation.
Rob, the provision dealing with the Strategic Petroleum Reserve was already passed and will go into effect on July 1st.
Next up, Seminole, Florida, on our line for Republicans. We're talking with Senator Bernie Sanders. Go ahead.
Oh, yes. Hi. Well, now, of course, I'm aware that the market manipulation is always harder to prove with oil, but in the nature of natural gas, which does power 40% of our power plants nationwide, I didn't know if they were going to follow up on the Department of Justice in Texas finished with, I think, 100 indictments against 12 El Paso gas traders. This from the 2000-2001 market manipulation. Actually, I think it was nationwide, not just in the Western markets. Was the congressman aware that in FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission had a 2003 document that says El Paso gas manipulated 99% of the northeast and southeast natural gas sectors, of which our power plants are fueled by the natural gas. I would think that the best market manipulation, after the gas traders for El Paso gas are found guilty, they have pipelines now nationwide. Where Enron left off, El Paso gas picked up. They did own Florida Gas Transmission in Florida. They have a monopoly on all of our gas pipelines. I would have thought there would have been a lawsuit by now, since the Department of Justice in Texas had lost.
Thanks, ma'am.
Well, the caller raises that same issue, and that is market manipulation. And what I have to say is that obviously under President Bush, there has not been aggressive action in any of these areas. We certainly know that natural gas for a number of years was heavily manipulated. Prices went up by a particular hedge fund who eventually collapsed and prices went down. So this whole issue in terms of natural gas, in terms of electricity, in terms of home heating oil, in terms of oil in general, has got to be looked at. We know that hedge funds function primarily in an unregulated market. We know that they're making huge tens of billions of dollars in profits We suspect strongly this has a lot to do with the manipulation of energy.
Senator McConnell says that windfall profits tax would actually drive up gas prices because the oil companies would just pass on the increase to consumers.
Yeah. Senator McConnell and many of the Republicans are apologists for the oil industry. That's apparently what their function in life is. Senator McConnell and others actually defend today the tax breaks and subsidies that were given to the oil industry, some $12 billion. Now, can anybody in their right mind think it a good public policy to provide billions of dollars in tax breaks and subsidies to ExxonMobil and oil companies that are enjoying record-breaking profits? Meanwhile, we can't pass the kind of tax breaks that we need for those people involved in sustainable energy. Rob, in my view, one of the great crises we face, not just as a nation, but as a planet, is getting a handle on global warming. The good news is that we can address that problem through energy efficiency and sustainable energy. The potential for wind, for solar, for geothermal, for biomass is enormous. And instead of giving tax breaks and subsidies to wealthy and powerful oil industries, we should be stimulating the sustainable energy industry, which can create millions of good-paying jobs, clean up our environment, and reverse global warming.
Next up, Wilson, Wyoming, on our line for Democrats.
Thank you very much. Please give me some time here, Rob. Bernie, we need a Manhattan type of project in our energy situation. You know that 50 miles off the coast of Alaska, 2,000 feet down, has been found an inexhaustible amount of methane gas. If we would get our engineers and scientists to be able to tap into this, that could solve a lot of our problems. And as per us drilling in Anwar or offshore, that is going to go on the world market. BP, is running the gas out of Alaska now and shipping it to Japan for refining. We should be using our Army and Air Force bases that are being closed and building refineries on there for our use. That would help us in quite an incredible way. Thank you.
Well, I think the idea of a Manhattan-type project where we developed a nuclear weapon in the middle of World War II is exactly right in terms of dealing with the energy crisis. I can give you dozens of examples. But right now, this is an ad about a plug-in hybrid, which gets 150 miles per gallon. This is a car that's on the road in a prototype form right now. The question is, why are we not producing these cars? Why are our engineers not working with the private sector in a crash program, a Manhattan-type program, to build it? Let me give you another example in terms of energy production. Right now, in the southwestern part of our country, in Southern California, Nevada, New Mexico, we have the potential, and work is already beginning, to build dozens of solar thermal plants. People are not familiar with this technology. This is not photovoltaic technology. These are large plants which have the capability of producing as much electricity as a small nuclear power plant, over 500 megawatts of electricity. There is work now being undertaken to start building these plants. We can produce 15 or 20% of the electricity in America in a cost-effective price by building these plants. In Germany, they have hundreds of thousands of rooftops with photovoltaic panels on their rooftops. We can do that. We can build a mass transportation system, revitalize our rail system, get automobiles that get really good mileage, get electric cars out there. We could do all of these things, create millions of good-paying jobs, reverse global warming, and stimulate our economy. That's the Manhattan-type project that we really need.
Williamsburg, Virginia, on our line for Republicans. Go ahead.
Good morning, C-SPAN. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning.
First, I'd like to make an observation. I think we're missing the boat here a little bit in that what are we doing to conserve energy? For instance, 5 suggestions. Why not a 5-day postal week? I think we could live with that. Why not military cutbacks on unnecessary training flights? Why not offshore drilling off the coast of California? They don't mind drilling in their outer continent on their inner water land because why? They get money from that, but they don't get money on the outer coastal shelf. You know what we should do? We should give them money to let them bring that oil in. And finally, why not go back to a 55-mile speed limit? And my question to you, sir, is if you understand trading, commodity trading, you realize on the near-term months, cash has to be paid for that commodity. Now, yes, it can move it into forward months, but the reality is the world price on the current month commodity is exactly cash has to be paid.
Well, cash does have to be paid, but the margin is very, very slim. In other words, I don't know exactly what the margin is, but for $1, you can buy many, many, many dollars of oil futures, and that's one of the problems. The gentleman talks about energy efficiency, and while I would look, he's absolutely right. What energy efficiency is the low-hanging fruit. The idea, for example, that we are driving automobiles that get 15 or 20 miles per gallon, when in Europe they are driving cars that get twice that mileage per gallon, is totally absurd. We can be moving toward electric cars. In my own state of Vermont, we have made some really significant progress through weatherization efforts and other programs to drive down the production, the utilization of electricity. There are light bulbs that are now coming onto the market, LED light bulbs, which will be, I think, in many, many forms within a couple of years, which will consume 1/10 the electricity that an incandescent light bulb consumes. We should be pushing that market, making sure that those light bulbs get into people's homes as soon as possible. But the potential for energy efficiency is absolutely spectacular. We have a long, long way to go. We've just dented the surface here.
Next up is Baltimore, Maryland on our line for Independence. Go ahead.
Good morning, Congressman. Good morning, Rob. My statement is that you listen to these Republicans sometimes who call this airwave, and they always talk about we need to drill in Anwar, we need to drill home, we need to drill home. Congressman, I have a speaking point for you. Those individuals didn't want to drill when gas or oil was at $50 per barrel because they thought it wasn't profitable. So now that it becomes profitable for them to drill at $120 a barrel, what makes these Republicans think that the oil company who takes a 20-year investment will actually reduce the price of their investment, which they need 20 years to recoup their money, that they would actually lower the price, first of all, because it wouldn't be feasible, it wouldn't make sense. And another thing that they would not do, when Maxine Waters made the suggestion that we nationalize the oil, oh man, they went to fit. But there's no other way to look at it. We can't nationalize the oil. It's not profitable for them to drill at $50 a barrel, a gallon, of $50 a barrel. Why would they invest that money and then lower the price?
Well, that's an interesting point. What I would say to you is that, among other things, the Bush administration's Energy Department, I believe, did a study trying to calculate what drilling in Anwar would mean for a gallon of gas. And I think their conclusion was that it would lower a gallon of gas in 20 years by about 1 cent a gallon. I don't think it is worth destroying or significantly harming a pristine environmental area to do that. I think in terms of drilling where it's environmentally sound, let's do it. Where it's not, we shouldn't. The real goal toward an energy transformation, however, has got to be toward sustainable energy, of which there is unbelievable potential, and energy efficiency. That is where I think the gains are going to be.
Our last call for Senator Sanders comes from Groveton, New Hampshire, on our line for Democrats. Go ahead.
Good morning, Senator. Being one of your neighbors and everything, I live in a depressed area right now. Groveton, New Hampshire. All of our mills are closed and everything. I'm a designer. I do mechanical designing for just about everybody, MBTA and such. And, of course, that's light rail. Okay, and that's one of the big things that is coming back. You know, my question, eminent domain. Okay, Yellowstone Park has a power source as big as this whole country is. If we put power plants around that caldera in Yellowstone Park for free, we could energize this whole country from shore to shore.
Thanks for your call.
Again, I think that there is huge, huge untapped potential in sustainable energy. And that means solar thermal power plants, it means photovoltaics, it means wind, it means geothermal, it means also energy efficiency, it means tidal, taking a hard look at the potential of energy from tides. It is sitting out there. And somebody earlier mentioned we need a Manhattan-type project, and that person is absolutely right. I think the end result of it is not only we clean up our environment, not only do we reverse global warming, we're going to create millions of jobs, stimulate the economy, putting people to work in these areas.
Senator Bernie Sanders, thank you very much for coming on the program.